Lord Talk Show podcast. Start your day off with a higher vibrational podcast with weekly guests covering spirituality, healthy foods, and so much more. Go to SherryLord.com for more info. Welcome, everybody. We're so happy that you're joining the Sherry Lord Show because we have a very special guest. Her name is Theresa Crater, and her topic for today will be Enlightenment is for everyone. But first, we want to encourage everybody to please chat. You have to say hi to enter the drawing. So make sure if you have a question, you put a Q, and then you ask a question, and if we have time, we will definitely come and Theresa will answer your questions or I. So we just love you guys joining us. And I have to tell you something, Theresa is amazing. Like I said, her topic today is Enlightenment is for everyone. What I love about Theresa, she grew up during the civil rights movement that taught her anything is possible. She also taught meditation since 1975. And she also had various shamanism, Western metaphysics, and Reiki. And the most thing I really find is awesome is that she is a best-selling author. Winning author, by the way, of 3 Awakenings. And we're going to discuss a little bit about that and about enlightenment, because I think people need to have a better understanding. And she's got some amazing stories to share with us about it. And we're going to give away 3 of her books, Complementary from Satiama Publishing. Make sure you go to their website or their Facebook page. They're amazing, but we want to thank Karen Stu for these Complementary award-winning book that she's been giving us. Those book lovers, I'm going to tell you one thing, this is a fantastic read. You're going to enjoy the book. Welcome, Theresa. We're so happy to have you on our show.
Well, thank you, Sherry. It's so great to be here. I really appreciate it. So, where should we start? You wanted to...
Well, what I want you to tell you, is there any highlights, anything that I had missed that you might want to share with the audience? And then we're going to talk about your enlightenment. You know, your own, okay. You said you had 3 little highlights about what had happened and a little bit more about enlightenment. I think that would be really, really good. Yeah.
Well, you know, one of the things I write about in the book is like we get a map of possibilities when we're children, that this is what the reality is, you know. And oftentimes we have this little feeling inside that maybe this is not all there is, right? Maybe there's something off about this map. And I think that, you know, you talked about my experiences as a teenager in the South with the civil rights movement. I really saw everything changed, you know. I mean, not everything, but a lot of things changed, and things that we thought were impossible changed. And so I began to get this feeling that, yes, anything is possible, that there are more possibilities in the world than anything. And then, then we were been told. And then in college, I had a friend who had learned to meditate, and she invited us to come to a lecture. And one of the funny things she said was, it doesn't matter what he says, just start. And it was funny. And so we went to this lecture, and that was what he said. He said, how many of you have friends who said, don't listen to anything I say, just start? And about half the audience raised their hands. But I just had this deep feeling, you know, at the end of the lecture that I should start meditating. And that first meditation, I had just an amazing experience of silence. And then we went on. And my girlfriend at the time, she went on and learned the next month. And then I had another friend who has gone on to become a great sound healer, Tom Kenyon. He started meditating a few months later. Tom, of course, has gone on to study all the major traditions. And I used to fuss at him when I was young and say, you should just meditate, stop. But, oh boy, how wrong was I, right? But in the process, we learned about different states of consciousness. And I was very fascinated by that. Human consciousness, we have the possibility of uniting our individual consciousness with that underlying one consciousness that is the source of the material world, the source of us, the source of our awareness. And it's possible to bring our individual consciousness into unity with that. And our teacher, our tradition, which comes basically out of a Shiva tradition, this particular teaching about states of consciousness comes out of a Shiva tradition in India. That we can experience cosmic consciousness when we realize that our individual consciousness is that underlying consciousness, and then we sort of witness the world from that state. We can see the world from that state, and then we begin to realize that, wait a minute, it's not just me.
Mm-hmm.
It's everything. Everything is this, one consciousness, and they call that unity consciousness. And so I could really, I was growing and evolving. My friends would say to me, "You're not as angry as you used to be," and things like that. And so, that was good in our daily lives. We start to unfold who we really are. I've had, the book is about 3 experiences of unity consciousness that I had. And I didn't stay there, unfortunately. I think it would be nice, and I think it's definitely possible to stay there. And as we continue to grow and evolve, we will stay there one day. But the first one was with the teacher of the Transcendental Meditation Program, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. I was having trouble becoming a teacher because I'm bisexual. At that point, I was living with a woman, and I had never had any problems. Our house was the center in Greensboro, North Carolina. We had people come. They got taught in our house. We knew a lot of teachers. Nobody had ever said a word until we got to Europe to be on the teacher training course. And here we were in the middle of the course, and we got told that we either had to separate or leave.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just, for me, that was like being told, okay, you can either eat or breathe, but you can't do both. So through a series of various things, I finally got to talk to Maharishi individually. And I'm sitting there in front of him, and he did not tell me I could go to teacher training. He didn't give me permission, which sort of blew my mind. I thought, what? But sitting there, it was an interesting thing. I just thought, okay, this is the way it is. Are you going to argue with this man who at that time I thought was enlightened? Some other things have come to light recently that maybe bring that into question. But I was this young devotee, so I thought, okay, I should do what the master tells me. And I just surrendered. I just thought, okay, and I looked up into his eyes, and it was like he looked at me and saw the whole of me. And I, in that moment with his, seeing me, I went back, I almost fell back into this unity. I experienced unity consciousness at that moment. And we both started laughing. It was hysterical. It was like, okay, here I am hysterically, what? Oh God, I just have to become a teacher, or, oh God, I can't, I have to. And then in that moment, I experienced myself as this unbounded being who had no end and no beginning. And it didn't matter if I went to this teacher training course now or ever, because I already was the thing I wanted to become. And so, and that was, I mean, what do you do then? I just started laughing, and I gave him a flower, and we both just, that was the end of it. I actually did get to go to the course, but that was the first experience I wrote about in the book. That shift, where you realize, wait a minute, I am this unboundedness.
That was huge.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
So, but we tend to remember the struggles, right? So that was the first one. But I went on to teach meditation, and I am not a member of the movement anymore, but I do teach individually, and I've been helping with friends who are working on teaching meditation in different ways, more independently, which might be appropriate for the age of Aquarius. Although a friend of mine just said, but the age of Aquarius is not happening until 2500 because, she does the sidereal Vedic astrology. She's like, it's not going to, Aquarius won't be rising. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I can tell that I feel that things are changing. Things are changing dramatically. So
they are. Yes, it's now actually. It's changing now.
Yeah. It is changing now. Yeah. A friend who has a son who's trained in the Hawaiian shamanic traditions said, your generation needs to just relax. He said, your job was to bring spirituality to the mainstream. And look what you've done. You did it. So, you did it. You did your job. And it's true. I mean, you turn on the TV, there's advertisements about meditation, are you stressed out about your business? And then they have somebody meditating. It's
becoming more mainstream. It's becoming more awareness of the mainstream. And
it really is.
See.
Yeah. The other two experiences that I write about in the book are really different experiences, different traditions. One was with a crystal skull. Max, I don't know if you know Max. I was in Hawaii because I had been studying with a shamanic group, and I had to leave that group because of what I call primate politics. You know how people get into craziness. And so I was in Hawaii, and my friend said, well, we're going to go see a crystal skull. And I was like, that's weird. I thought, well, that's very peculiar, but okay, I'll go. And so, so I went and met Joanne Parks, who was at that time was the guardian of Max. And she was walking around the circle talking about her history with Max and her daughter who was sick and the healer she took him to. And Max was in the care of this healer at the time. And then the scientific research. And I was sort of like, oh, science. Okay. So I started meditating while she was talking. And Max, all of a sudden I felt this little stream of energy coming out from the skull. It was like this little stream of energy. And he came, it was like, knock, knock, on my door, And I said, oh, and it was like I gave him permission sort of to come in, and he took that little stream of energy and he just turned the nozzle and turned it into a fire hose.
Wow.
And he just knocked me into a higher state of consciousness. It was, what a surprise. Who could have imagined such a thing, right? It had been years since I had been there, and I just started crying. I'm in the middle of this group, and Joanne is trying to talk, right? And she comes over and pets me on the shoulder while I'm just crying. Max said to me, he said to me, it's all right, it's all right. So it was such a relief. It was like finally going home again, When I came back, I moved to Boulder. I had been living in Manitou Springs, right under the mountain.
Yep.
And then once I unpacked, I got the local newspaper and saw Max was coming to town again. And my guide said, you're not going to have such an experience again. It's not going to be as intense. But I went, of course. And Max would never answer questions for me. He would say, stop. Put your head here, and we would just meditate together, because to him, he knew that I knew that being in a higher state of consciousness was what was important. And so, but he would ignore me. But I had been told I would be in a new relationship, this time with a man. And I was like, where is he? Which is now I think is silly. Why are we worried about being in relationships, right? And so we're in the group again later. I had a private session. We're in the group. Tell me if I'm going too long. And so Max is sitting there. Joanne's giving her talk. And then it was a smallish group. So she invited each person to come up and have a little private moment with Max. And the guy who had been sitting next to me goes up to Max. And he does this. He was a Rosicrucian, so he does this thing with him. And I'm like, oh, what's that? And And Max turns to me, it's as if he turns to me. Of course, he didn't move. And he said, "Will this one do?"
He knew.
I said, well, okay, I'll check it out. And that was Stephen Mehler. And Stephen Mehler is an Egyptologist. And we've been together since then. That was 1997. And Max really channeled energy into our relationship. I had told my mother I was going to be a writer when I was 7. I would say, I'm going to be a writer. She would say, she thought I meant rider of horses. And she would say, you can't make a living doing that, Theresa. and little did she know that even being a writer is hard to, make a living. But I started writing books. I have like 10 books out now. Steve has 3 books out, 2 on Egypt, 1 on the crystal skulls. He had studied crystal skulls as a Rosicrucian scientist. He worked for the science. He was a staff research scientist for the Rosicrucians. And so he and David Hatcher Childress wrote a book about crystal skulls, which is out, and Astonishing Portals or something like that. And he started giving tours of Egypt. He's given 21 tours of Egypt. He's been to Egypt 23 times. Egypt is his heart, right? And so Max really, channeled his energy into us to get us to start doing our work. And when we'd have him at our house and host meditations with Max and talks, and Max would always say to Steve, "So, are you doing your work? What are you doing?" He would also tell him how to serve lunch, which, Max is very practical. But he's moved on now to a new keeper, Jenna Pearson, who lives in Malibu. So, have we had any chat people? Does anybody having...
we have people watching and we have people liking us, but make sure that your comment is clicked on so that you can see too.
Yeah.
And we want to tell people to please, for us to do the drawing, you have to say hi in the chat box. If you have a question, please put a Q. We know everyone's watching because I can see the numbers. But we want people to chat and join us because we'd love to hear what you have to say. If you have a question for Theresa, she'll be more than happy to answer that. Plus, we'd love to give away 3 of her amazing books. They are great reads. But no, Theresa, you are fantastic. And people watching are liking us, but we really want them to say hello.
Yes, do say hello. Otherwise, you're going to have to listen to me talk about things.
We love it. I have a question about the skull. I have a question about the skull. And I want you to continue because you have amazing stories.
Okay.
Can you explain to people, because not everybody understands the skull. To me, it's information. For people to not be afraid of it. This is really what it means,
Yes. In the Western culture, we think skulls mean death, right? Like they're evil. And also, I just took my big skulls downstairs, and here's my little tiny one. Where are you? Here's Spark, little Spark. See little Spark?
Oh wow!
Little Spark goes around with me and gets energy from different sites, and then I put her with all the other skulls so she can give them the energy she picked up. And she recently went to Egypt. She was sitting right on top of the lotus staff of Sekhmet in her shrine, so she soaked up her energy. But for the Maya, the skulls are very different, and even in Western culture, the skull and crossbones actually represents the Templars. Remember way back on Friday the 13th, and Steve would know exactly, he's the encyclopedia around here, what year it was that the Templars were massacred. But when the Pope declared that they were, they were an enlightened group that practiced Gnostic Christianity, which is exactly what we're talking about. In each tradition around the world, every major spiritual tradition, everybody, there's one branch that talks about consciousness, how we can reunite with one consciousness, unite with God, unite with, whatever word you want to use for this awareness. And the Templars were Gnostics. They were mystics, and the church turned against them. But people who died they went to the Temple Mount to try to find some treasures in Jerusalem. And when someone would die on a crusade like that, the only things that they would send back to the family were the skull and the thigh bones, because the rest of, you can't transport a body at that time. And so the skull and crossbones is also a symbol of the Templars when they left, when they were thrown out of Europe. A lot of people say they went to Scotland. They came here, some of them. And some of them became pirates because they had ships. They had a whole fleet. And so the skull and crossbones of the pirates is often a symbol of the Templars. So they're mystic pirates out there in the world, which I think is fantastic.
It is.
And so, I know. And so to the Maya, the skull represents many things, but it's also a repository of knowledge. This is a repository of knowledge. And these skulls were, the really ancient ones were created in very old times, and then they would do a ceremony a little bit like opening the mouth of that they did with the statues in Egypt to bring the consciousness of that particular god or goddess, which we call Neter, as a Neter, Neter. They bring that and enliven that awareness into that statue. And they would do the same thing with the skulls. They would enliven them so that they could channel. Max is a channel of Christ consciousness, which, what a surprise. I was so shocked by that when it happened. I thought, okay, here's this weird skull and this woman is talking. But then he knocked me into this state of consciousness, and I realized that he is an enlightened being. And also the Maya and the Masons, as you probably know if you've read Dan Brown.
Yeah.
Dan Brown and I must be plugged into the same socket. I swear, we keep writing similar books. I'm like, what is this? Anyway, that happens a lot though in the world. The universe is like, here, I have information. Who's available? Right? But the Masons have a meditation where you sit in front of a skull and to realize that you are not this body, that you will die, but you will continue on. And also the skulls represent, they use the skulls in the Day of the Dead to honor the ancestors in Mexico and in Central America. So the skulls are, they have many meanings, but they're not evil. Also, Max is probably, Jenna will say that he was carved using consciousness in Atlantis. Personally, I think he's older than that. And some people think he came from the Pleiades. The Maya say that their ancestors way back came from the Pleiades, and they came to 4 spots in the earth, and they started their civilizations there. There is actually a spot in Egypt where there's a tomb of a man called Maya. And Steve's teacher, Ab'del Hakim Awyan, who has passed on now, we call it going into the West. When somebody dies, he went into the West. He took him to this tomb of Maya, and on the ceiling, there are actually glyphs that are Mayan glyphs. And Steve took a picture of these and sent them to some of the daykeepers, Mayan daykeepers, and they said, "Yeah, those are our glyphs," and that's one of the spots that we had we were a part of the civilization. So that's pretty amazing.
That was very, it's nice to have clarity on that, because there are just different perceptions and different beliefs around everything. And thank you for clarifying that. And again, we're going to
Yeah.
say one more time, in order to do the drawing, you have to type pi, and then I can run the drawing to see who wins. And if not, I'm going to run a separate drawing because her book is fascinating to read. It's a really good book. I will run a private giveaway tomorrow, and I will give away 3 of the books. And if you want to purchase her book, go to Satiama.com, SatiamaPublishing.com. They also have a Facebook page. And how can people get a hold of you? How can people get a hold of you, Theresa?
Well, I have a website. It's TheresaLCrater.com or just TheresaCraterBooks.com. You can email me at Theresa@TheresaLCrater.com. So that's me. I'm on Facebook too.
Are you on Facebook or any of the social medias too?
Oh yeah, I'm on Facebook. I'm looking at it's Theresa Crater-writer, I think.
Ooh.
Let me
She
make
is
sure.
an amazing writer. I will say she is a
writer.
really good writer. She's a very good writer.
Thank you.
She's a good influencer. You really are. And it was, like I said, you have an amazing book. You have an amazing natural. You're an author, you're a writer, and you're the best-selling. You have a best-selling, award-winning author. So I think this is wonderful. We're so happy to have you on our show.
Thank you.
And that we love you so much, and we'll have you back again. Are you writing any other books right now? Or you have anything in the works?
Yeah, actually, I'm working right now on paranormal women's mystery. It's just a fun thing. It's about 2 friends, well, 3 friends, and one of them has a near-death experience. A plane almost crashes, and in the process, she becomes an animal communicator. She saves this little dog on the plane, and the dog starts talking to her, and she's like, "Okay." But
it sounds like a fun read.
It's
fun.
My God. I hope it's fun. Anyway, that's what I'm working on. I didn't get to talk about sacred sites, but sacred travel is also a way to expand our consciousness. And I think that's really important too.
Is that a book that you have?
Well, sacred sites are in many of my books. It's certainly in 3 Awakenings. There's a whole section on sacred sites, but also I have the Power Places series. And Power Places, it goes to the sacred sites around the world. My team goes and, has adventures in these sites. And that's what you call visionary fiction. That's able to, you tell a fun story, but in the process, you bring all these ancient traditions and teachings in and weave them into the plot.
Wow. Thank you so much again, Theresa, for being on our show. We love having you. And we'd really love her to come back with Randy, because he's done a lot of Egyptian tours. And we'd love to have you, if you both could make it back on, we would love to have you both. We have to have him with us on the show with you. And we think that would be really a fascinating thing to talk about. So many people are fascinated with Egypt and other
areas. Yeah.
And I just want to say thank you. And make sure you go to www.sherrylord.com if you want to have more information about our guest or even about Theresa. I have a link to her as well there. And we have upcoming guests. If you want to be a guest on our show, again, go to www.sherrylord.com. All the information is there. And if you want to place an ad with us, we just want to say thank you, and we'll see you all again. Thank you for joining us, everyone, and Theresa. Blessings to all.
Thank you.